more.
Glorious day, fellow traveler. Welcome to Science and God with Dr. G. That's me, Dr. Michael Gillen, physicist, astronomer, mathematician, and Christian. That's right, living, breathing evidence that science and Christianity are not mortal enemies, but good friends. Actually, an awesome power couple. Back when I was a scientific monk in grad school, when I was an atheist, I defended my atheism by saying I don't need God. God isn't necessary. Well, today atheists are still using that excuse to defend atheism. What exactly do atheists mean by that? Well, they mean that you don't need God to explain the universe. You see, according to atheism's worldview, the idea of God was invented a whole long time ago by humans who were just too dumb to know better. They invented gods to explain the mysteries of nature, like thunder. But now that we're in the 21st century, now that science can explain all those mysteries, shame on you for still believing in God. The idea of God, according to atheism, is like an appendix. It's a relic from the past, our superstitious past, and it should be surgically removed. This argument is also known as the God of the gaps theory. We invented God to paper over the gaps in our understanding of the universe. But now that science is explaining everything, the gaps are disappearing. And so, atheism says, should this ignorant God of the gaps? No gaps? No God needed. Case closed. If only life were that simple, right? For starters, our belief in the supernatural existed way before we started trying to explain the mysteries of nature. That's because we're born right out of the starting gate with a superpower I call spiritual intelligence, or SQ for short. Only we humans have it because only we are created in the image of God. With SQ, we have the ability to sense the existence of an unseen universe. With SQ, we have the ability to sense the presence of God, whether we admit it or not. Atheism would have you believe that IQ, logical intelligence, is the superpower, but it isn't. SQ is way more powerful than your IQ. I'm writing a book about that, should be coming out next spring. IQ, you see, depends on SQ to work. SQ is like the engine of your car. Without that engine, your car doesn't work. Well, without your SQ, your IQ doesn't work either. Because of your SQ, you can sense not just the seeable, provable, and imaginable realities of life. Because of your SQ, you can also sense the unseeable, unprovable, and unimaginable realities in life. The really deep, mysterious stuff. The stuff that matters. The stuff that makes life interesting. Hey there, breaking in for just a second to tell you about where human society is headed. The world my Gen Z son and his generation will inherit promises to be very different than the one we grew up in. That's why I've written a book called The End of Life as We Know It, Ominous News from the Frontiers of Science. Think of it as a survival manual for the 21st century. You can get it on Amazon or wherever you buy books. Now, back to the podcast. Atheism would have you believe that science has taken SQ and God out of the equation. That we no longer need supernatural explanations. That we no longer need God to explain the mysteries of the universe. But again, that's not true. Take thunder, for example. Sure, thanks to science, we now know that thunder is caused by a mighty collision in the atmosphere, right? Thunder is caused by hundreds of millions of air molecules all banging into each other. But that doesn't mean we've taken God out of the explanation. How did those molecules come into being in the first place? Who or what created them? Oh, sure, science has explanations for that too. But their theories all rely on SQ, on spiritual intelligence. And not one of those theories makes God unnecessary. In fact, if anything, the theories now make God more necessary than ever before. See, that's the great irony. That's the great flaw in atheism's worldview. Because what we're finding is that the more science explains things, the more mysterious the universe becomes, not less. For example, because of astronomy, we now have evidence that 95% of the universe is invisible to us. 95%. It's there. We just can't see it. Because of math, we now know that all kinds of important truths are unprovable. They're true, but logic just isn't strong enough to prove them. We must accept them on faith. And because of physics, my beloved physics, we now have evidence that the universe was created from scratch by forces we don't understand and can't even imagine. The unseeable, the unprovable, the unimaginable. Far from eliminating the supernatural from our lives, science has opened our minds to the unseeable, unprovable, and unimaginable realities of life. All thanks to our SQ, our spiritual intelligence. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love Him. Those aren't my words. That's 1 Corinthians 2:9. So, my fellow traveler, please don't get suckered in by atheism's flawed worldview. Far from making God unnecessary, science is showing us how necessary He really is. Far from making God a relic of the past, science is showing us that God is timeless, as relevant today in the 21st century as He was back when our ancestors cowered at the sound of thunder. Far from painting God out of the picture, science is expanding our picture of His stunning creation. And in the process, science is magnifying our understanding of God Himself. Remember, this podcast is not a lecture series. It's a conversation. So now it's your turn. Comments? Questions? I'm eager to hear from you. There's all kinds of ways you can connect up with me via my social media links in the show notes below.